So to start off, the Screwtape Letters is a Christian apologetic novel written by C.S. Lewis and during World War II. It encompasses the letters between a senior demon named Screwtape and his nephew Wormwood. This time period kind of helps to provide the readers an insight on what the characters might be going through and helps us better understand what exactly is going on. Screwtape is given the task to mentor his nephew in the eternal damnation of a young British man. Screwtape is diabolical and is a liar and can never be trusted. So no matter what quotes I give to y'all today, just know that they're not true. So first of all, people are obsessed with the idea of sin. One of society's biggest issues is the deficiency of Christianity within today's society. Lust, jealousy, and even deception are considered normative and are sometimes seen as respectable, just depending on certain circumstances. Even though sin has always been prevalent, even before Christianity was the dominating religion, it is still a major issue and needs to be discussed. It is not a strange idea or located to time, culture, or place, but it is universal and has dire consequences, including perpetual damnation and hell. So first of all, temptation is not sin. Temptation only becomes sin when dwelt upon and acted upon. So in the Screwtape Letters, Screwtape is giving his nephew Wormwood the advice of making sure that his patient, which is the young British man that he is trying to condemn to hell, he is making sure that he is not conscious of everything that he is doing, that he is only half conscious of certain things, and it kind of gives a sense of him being more susceptible to sin due to his lack of faith. Dwelling on temptation, like I said earlier, is what causes someone to act upon sin, which is what makes temptation a sin. So many do not believe that devils exist just because they are physically not visible. Devils target their victims in order to cause a rift between either their religion, morals, or beliefs. So one of the quotes I found was, "It is funny how mortals always picture us as putting things in their minds. In reality, our best work is done by keeping things out." And instead of giving negative thoughts into someone, a devil's best bet, I guess you would call it, is by making sure that their patient has a sense of emptiness and numbness, because when someone has a sense of emptiness and numbness, they tend to not think things are as important as they should be. And humans can also make two mistakes when it comes to the existence of devils. And in the preface, C.S. Lewis states that there are two equal and opposite errors into which our race can fall about devils. One is to disbelieve in their existence, and the other is to believe and to feel excessive and unhealthy interest in them. When someone overly thinks something or has an unhealthy interest in them, they tend to overthink it, and that can cause not only a rift between the people that you love and care about, but also within your faith. So similar to temptation, pleasure is not a sin, but can become a sin once someone gets into temptation. Screwtape advised his nephew to never forget that when we are dealing with any pleasure in its healthy and normal and satisfying form, we are, in a sense, on the enemy's ground. I know we have won many a soldier's pleasure. So in this quote, God is referred to as the enemy because essentially he is Satan's enemy. Screwtape acknowledges that one, God exists, and two, that he created pleasure and that it can be corrupted. Similar to how a good person can commit unspeakable acts, even though it's shocking or horrifying, they still can. Pleasure can be transformed into something purely of evil in the sight of God. And pleasure becomes a real issue whenever someone has lust for it because they are unable to control their desire for pleasure, which can lead to gluttony, drunkenness, and even excessive pride. So devils can best accomplish their work by distractions. So when someone is distracted, kind of like whenever I was saying earlier how they have a sense of numbness, it gets their minds off of the present and what is happening at that moment. They won't be able to realize what is going on, that they are having a good time in that state. Screwtape stated that man has been accustomed ever since he was a boy to having a dozen incompatible philosophies, dancing about together inside his head. He doesn't think a doctrine is primarily true or false, but as academic or practical, outworn or contemporary, conventional or ruthless. Jargon, not argument, is your best ally in keeping him from the church. So jargon is a form of technical terms that are used within a specific group of people who are either in the same profession or just have a specific type of language they speak. And jargon can be extremely confusing. Screwtape was saying that to use jargon because it causes confusion, which can eventually lead to the separation from the church due to misinterpreted information. In the 12th letter, Screwtape advises Wormwood to keep his patient only half conscious of his guilt. Whenever someone is guilty, a lot of times they tend to avoid confrontation because their guilt can be too overwhelming for them to handle, to understand, and they tend to put their blames onto a higher authority, which in the sake of my paper would be God. So choice is desired by every human, and everyone has that choice whether or not to give into that temptation, to let their guilt overcome them. God gives everyone a choice. So a weakened faith is a result of a decline with many things going on behind the scenes. A lot of times when someone has a weakened faith, sin becomes second nature to us. Even though it already is, it becomes more of an issue and is easier to give into. If temptation is done quickly, then the patient, or in this case, one of us, will become even more aware of what's happening and will understand and try and go back to their faith. But for the sake of my book, whenever I was reading it, Screwtape, that is not what he wants. He does not want them to realize what is going on. He wants it to be a slow decline in their faith and to tempt them slowly because it makes it to where it's less likely that their patient will understand what is going on. Screwtape also counsels Wormwood and tells him to use manipulation into how to tempt his patient. The patient is a young British man who was in the United Kingdom during World War II and was actually a soldier in World War II. With dealing with war, a lot of soldiers end up having post-traumatic stress disorder, which is one of the things that the patient had. So Screwtape told Wormwood that whatever their bodies do affects their soul. And kind of like with how the patient had PTSD, going through something like that at maybe such a young age, because the CS never gave us an exact age, just that he was a young British man. And during that time period, the soldiers were drafted when they were about 18. So I'm just assuming that he's a young age. And so going through something that traumatic at such a young age can definitely have not only mental effects, but also physical effects to your body, which make it extremely easier for devils to tempt you because they already are inside of your head because of that reason. So one of the only ways to stand firm and to prevent this happening is by standing firm in your faith and surrounding yourself by people who either have similar beliefs to you or are good, virtuous people if you are not a religious person. So prayer is something that is extremely important, whether you're a Christian or whether you're not religious at all. Just having some sort of way to communicate how you're feeling is very important. So a Christian, so because my book is a Christian apologetic novel, I will be doing all of this from the perspective of a Christian. So a Christian viewpoint on prayer is extremely crucial in their life, both inside and outside of a religious atmosphere. Prayer is used as an outlet for religion as a way to communicate with a higher deity. Prayer in Christianity, prayer is a big way for Christians to be able to talk to God, and that is something that keeps us closer to Him. I personally am a Christian, and being able to pray about my problems and whenever I'm feeling like I'm being tempted really helps draw me myself closer. I believe that the only way for a non-Christian to be able to prevent from something like this happening to them is by being a virtuous person. People without virtue, it is impossible for them to create relationships and friendships with people. And without virtue, humans are susceptible to temptation and sinful actions. So There's a Bible story about Jesus being tempted. Jesus was able to give us the perfect example of how we can resist temptation. He didn't give in to his physical needs, or he declined being offered the entire world and just all these other things that he was already promised beforehand. But just like Jesus showed us a perfect example, we need to try our hardest to give a good example of how we can resist this stuff. And thank you.
Wonderful job, Ms. Rochfort. So now we're going to open the floor online and also here in person to questions. And I will let you know when we have to conclude regarding the question period, because we are on the clock. We have to do it exactly on the clock with passing period, start, everything like that. It's right on the clock. So any questions? I'm going to open the floor to any questions. Yes?
Why do you think the book was written from the perspective of devil?
Okay, so originally C.S. was actually going to write it from an angel's point of view. But humans, we're a lot more like devils than we are angels. We sin, we have evil thoughts. So I believe that that is why he did that, because it's easier for us to understand what is going on from a viewpoint of someone that is not perfect.
Okay. Anyone else?
Was it mentioned in the book, or if it wasn't, just your thoughts on it? Was Screwtape, do you think, like fallen angel? Was he good at any point in time, or was he always bad?
It doesn't mention that specifically, but I believe that he was always bad because, so I'm a Christian, and I've always learned that Satan is a fallen angel. And so I believe that he is, just because demons are also fallen angels along with Satan, so that's kind of like what I believe.
Why did you choose the Screwtape?
I chose this book because I know multiple different people who have read it and have recommended it to me, and I just never really got around to reading it because I didn't think I'd be interested in it. But after reading it, I read the summaries on it at first before I decided to read the book to decide whether or not I liked it, and it seemed really interesting, and just I wanted something that kind of not challenged my views, but helped me see them in a different way and be able to explain them.
Okay. Any other questions? Well, I do have some questions. I want to emphasize again, wonderful analysis, I would say, of the Screwtape letters. Screwtape letters is often a very interesting book to decipher, and it's something to be read over and over again. That's the one thing I could say. But one question that I have for you is, based on the text of the book, which do you think the demons like more? Do you think they like to see their patients suffer, or seeing them enjoy themselves?
I believe that they prefer to see their patients enjoy themselves, because if someone's suffering, they're going to turn to something higher in order to figure out what's going on, get help, and like that. But if they're enjoying themselves with simple pleasures and luxuries, and that's essentially what they want.
Okay. Any other questions? Any other questions before we conclude? So I would like to say we can give Ms. Rochfort a round of applause. Made it to the finish line.
Oh, I was